Hi, I'm Leo, this is Crash Course Jenkins, and today we're going to delegate Jenkins jobs to agents. An agent is a thing that runs your pipelines and jobs. It can live on a different server, on the same server, or in a container. At first, agents were designed as a Java application that would run on a different host and run your jobs for you to spread the load. But we've gone far, so now we can spawn those agents on demand in a cloud. The simplest way to run a Jenkins agent is to start a Java application that you can download from the Jenkins UI, and it will just connect to your master server and will do things for you. But bear in mind that this agent, this Java application, must live in environment suitable for your job. So you have to provide every executable the job uses, every environment variable it might need, and permissions. There is also a concept of an executor with agents and Jenkins nodes in general. One node, be it master or agent, can have multiple executors, which means it can run several jobs in parallel, which would come in handy if you want to parallelize a lot of jobs on a single big host. But we will run our agent in Docker, of course. Cloud. There are several plugins for Jenkins that allow you to run containers in different environments, be it in just Docker, in Docker Swarm, in Nomad or Kubernetes. In a minute we'll run a few agents in Docker and Kubernetes. I do not have a Nomad cluster handily available, sorry. The first thing we're going to do is configure cloud in our Jenkins. Over there. The computer's over there. So last episode we've installed Jenkins in Docker, link right here. We will go to manage nodes and clouds and configure clouds, and we'll see nothing. That's because we need some plugins to install. We'll find Docker over here. Also we're gonna search for Kubernetes and Nomad, just for the sake of it. After we click install, they will try to install, and some of them will fail just because of the failed dependencies that require restart. And then after we restart, we shall see all the new menus that we desire. We will talk about plugins and their dependencies and installations later in the series. Now it's all installed, we can go to Manage Jenkins, back to Manage Nodes and Clouds, Configure Clouds, and there is our magical button. Let us start with Docker. As you might remember, we have already exposed a Docker socket to a special container that exposes it on a TCP port right here. We shall grab this address and give it to Jenkins and see what it does. Well, let's click test connection, and it says client sent an HTTP request. That's because he thinks it's a plain text connection and it doesn't require authentication, but it does. Let's give him some. We will need everything that takes part in client certificate authorization. So we have mapped a volume last episode with Docker certificates. That is exactly what we need. First, let's inspect our data volume and see where exactly on a host those files live. That is the location we want. All those certificates, keys, and CAs and stuff live there. Of course, it's only accessible with sudo, right? So we just read those files with sudo and copy and paste them in their respective field in Jenkins Credentials Manager. You will need client certificate, client key, and of course CA for all these things to work. I have already added those credentials. Remember, it's always a bad idea to show your certificates, keys, etc. on the internet. Should be obvious, right? Well, now, after we choose our credentials and we click Test Connections, the thing will magically discover that this is HTTPS, and we'll find out everything we need. So we're done with Docker host configuration. Now we need to add an agent template. So Docker host itself doesn't do anything. It needs something to run. So we will create our agent template. We'll label them Docker. That's how we'll choose on which node, in this case agent, to run our workload. We will use this official Jenkins agent image. It has everything an agent would need to actually do something, interpret commands, and connect back to the master server and, actually execute something. There are plenty of flavors of this image. It is available on different operation systems, on different Java versions, so you should be fine anyway. In any case, right next to it, there's quite a lot of images with different runtimes, different Maven versions, if you will ever need it. So, again, everything's pre-built for you. But nonetheless, next episode, we will create our custom images with our custom things. But sorry, I digress. We leave most of the things by default. We will cap the instance limit on 4 for the entire host and 2 on this container. And also there is a dirty hack that we have to do for it to work. We have to point the thing to Java. For some bizarre reason, Jenkins have no idea where to find Java, but as we will see right now, Java home environment variable is set and correct. So we're going to just echo it and figure out where exactly our Java lives inside the container. So we'll copy the thing and just give it to Jenkins so it will know where to find Java. Otherwise, it will try to install Java from Oracle, and as you might know, Oracle decided to only allow downloads with an account, and Docker doesn't have an account. All sorts of shenanigans, so we don't want that. Now, after we save it, we can add a new job. This time, we will specify where exactly we want to run it. Let's call it Docker1. It's, again, freestyle project for now. And there is a very important checkbox. See, this one. Restrict where this project can be run. So we will type our label, it will recognize it and let us choose it. And that is it. Right now, we only add our hello world again. This label expression just specified which labels. It can be a template, it can be a regular expression, yes, but it will only run this job in Docker labeled nodes, which we have 1, as it told us right there. And if we click build now, we shall see the container launch in a bit. It will take a bit of time, but still it will create a container, run echo command, and what do we have here? Hello Docker. That thing works. Next, what do we have next? Right, Kubernetes. So this setup is quite similar to Docker's. We again add another cloud. We will need, of course, to specify the endpoint. We'll need to create a namespace. Don't forget, create a namespace in Kubernetes beforehand. Naturally, we will need to authenticate in Kubernetes, so we will add another client certificate. This time, we will grab those from kubeconfig file. So there will be key and client certificates. I do not have CA just because I use skip CLS verify option for quickness. And yeah, important part. Inside kubeconfig file, everything is base64 encoded. So you will need to copy them, decode it from base64 first, and only then give it to Jenkins. Otherwise, it will yell about wrong credentials. Now, again, all those things are still default or the same as in Docker. We click test connection and it's fine. Now we shall need a pod template, the same thing as we did it with Docker, but for the container. Right now we do for a pod. So create a template for a pod. It's the same thing. Label, name, we will need a container template. That will be exactly the same as with Docker. There is an option to write your pod from scratch as a YAML file. We will do this later in the series, but not for now. I will leave most of those default, and all the things you will need to change are right here on your screen. You may note node selector specified. That's only because my cluster is finicky, and the same Java home hack is applied here as well because it's the same image. We have a k-test job that does exactly the same thing, but on a label expression k8s. Again, it tells us that label is served by one node and one cloud. I wonder why one node. Right, that's because we didn't specify a node restriction in Docker, so it will try to do it there as well. But still, we shall run it, and we see in a log not only our hello world, but the entire pod manifest, which proves that it actually ran on Kubernetes. And for debug, it's useful to have it right here. If you do not want to see this pod manifest, this huge YAML file every time, you can go to pod templates and disable it. There is a checkbox for it right here. That's it with our nodes. One more thing I'd like to do today is to install configuration as code plugin. It will make our life a bit easier just because we can store, well, you guessed it, configuration as code. I shall take a bit of this configuration and put it in GitHub. Please, please, please read before applying or importing or copying stuff. I will heavily redact it and I will leave only the necessary configuration, so you might break it. That is not intended to be used as a config export or import. That is a repository. Jenkins YAML is our configuration. Everything regarding this crash course will be in that repository eventually. And today we learned how to run agents in clouds. Wonderful. Now a little side note. No one is forcing you to run those things in cloud, in Docker. There is no right answer. There is no correct way to do it. I like to run my Jenkins agents in Kubernetes clusters just because it doesn't waste resources. Because if we have any number of, let's say, RAM-consuming builds, we will need to keep a huge host just waiting for this job to be fired. And it's usually a waste because 99% of the time this host just does nothing, just sits and waits. With Kubernetes, you can actually have autoscaling, cluster autoscaling that will bring up new nodes if there is no resources for your scheduled pods, which in essence our agent is. But keeping that in mind, there is exactly 0 point in setting up Kubernetes cluster just for Jenkins. It doesn't make sense, right? The only thing I would strongly advise, if you decide to run a dedicated Jenkins worker host, is really spawn containers in Docker there. That way you'll keep your host environment clean. So you will only manipulate Docker images and Docker containers. It can really save you a lot of pain once you try to move it. That'll be it for today. The next time we'll be building custom images for our agents. So subscribe for more, like if you do, and see you there. Bye.